I personally don't think weight loss diets are really effective. The best way to lose weight and maintain is to adopt a complete lifestyle change that is sustainable. Does the average person need to be concerned about protein deficiency? I would say a resounding no. All the new research is saying that protein is actually not the best way to build muscle. If you do not poop at least once every day, you are constipated. Without fiber, you cannot poop. And if you don't poop, it doesn't matter what your abs look like. I promise you, you are going to be wishing that you could give your abs away and just have an opportunity to make a bowel movement.
G'day and welcome back to another episode of Science Radio. My name's Jesse and I'm joined by my co-host Zanita. Hello, Zanita.
Hello, everyone. Good to be here.
And we are joined today by one of our favorite authors, one of our favorite health authors. And I just have to say this, the author who probably includes the most footnotes in all of her articles of any author that we have contributing to Science of the Times. It's Sisi Toro. Hello, Sisi.
Hi, guys. I'm so excited to be back. Thank you for having me again.
So good to have you. Last time we spoke, I believe, I could be wrong, I believe we talked about pregnancy and the pregnancy myths and all that sort of stuff. And back then, I don't think you were pregnant, but since we spoke, you have gotten pregnant and you have a child. So congratulations.
Yes, I do have a child. She's actually hiding from the camera right now. She is currently in my arms sitting here. She's 13 months now, and I'm loving being a mother. And it's funny because we talked about all the myths about geriatric pregnancy, and I gave birth to her at 37 years old, which is considered geriatric these days. But yeah, I I am evidence actually that geriatric pregnancies are totally fine.
Fantastic.
Love it. Now, this conversation, we are talking about protein, which is a pretty hot topic today. When I go through the supermarket, I see it everywhere. It's in yogurts, it's in coffee, it's in toothpaste, which is crazy. It's in popcorn. Like, it's just put in everything, obviously, for a reason because we're all reaching for it. So, why do you think that it's such a hot topic at the moment?
Protein actually has been a real buzzword probably for more than a decade. I know when I first started becoming interested in health, it was a huge buzzword. And even when I first joined the gym, this was, I'm going to say 20 years ago, probably now. I remember I had a personal trainer, and even back then, she was telling me I needed to get, I believe it was at least 1 gram of protein per kilogram of weight. And, she was giving me a minimum for the amounts of protein I needed. So it's been a hot topic for a while, but you're right. I think now it's excessive. It literally is in everything. And I think a lot of that comes from the nutrition industry and just food marketing, and everyone's trying to push protein because it is essential, but they're making it essential at levels I think that are actually unrealistic.
Yeah.
So it is really important, but the amount of protein that people are pushing these days, I think, is not as accurate as it should be.
Yeah, I remember I've got a few friends who are gym bros, and when I see their lunches, it's the typical thing that you see for meat eaters. It's pale slab of chicken with some broccoli and maybe some rice. And, different strokes for different folks. Some people eat food for fuel and don't really care about flavor. I will never be that person, but I have to wonder when I see meals like that, are you getting all the nutrition that you need? I'm assuming you're getting the protein that you need, but I have always wondered, as a non-medical person or a non-nutrition type person, is that the best thing to just be shoveling down the protein and, oh, well, if I have to put some broccoli in there as well and some rice, then I guess that's what I have to do.
That's a really great question. And the short answer is no, it's not the best thing to do. Honestly, protein is currently hailed as the major macro that you need. We have people on actually even high protein diets, which is not healthy at all. And it overshadows all these other nutrients that are also really essential. We need vitamins, we need minerals. And these days, a lot of people are deficient in these minerals. So I don't think it needs to be so excessively pushed. And I personally think people are actually eating too much protein, which most people would be shocked by. But when you look at the data, how much protein people are getting versus how much people actually need, most people are having too much.
Hmm. Interesting. Can we go into that a little bit? Because I feel like every time I listen to a podcast or a video or read an article, the optimal amount is always a little bit different, which makes a big difference when you're trying to get a certain amount in each day. So, what is that optimal amount? Obviously, that will be different for people who are weight training or maybe in different seasons of their life, but just for the everyday person.
Yeah, so some of the most reputable nutrition professors that I follow, I will give their recommendation based on their research, the data that is available that they've published and released. I'm not going to give the recommended daily allowance because that actually is very flawed. That whole system is really flawed, not just for protein, but for basically every nutrient. From what I've read, the amount is about zero point 0.8 grams per kilogram is actually the maximum you need,
Mm.
Mm.
which is really shocking because most people will say, and this is what I was saying, my personal trainer was recommending a minimum of 1 gram per kilogram. And when you look at the published data from food studies, most people, at least in the US, the data that I've seen is mostly in the US, but I imagine it's very similar in Australia, just based on similar eating patterns and diets. Most people are actually getting about 1.5 grams per kilogram. So almost double what you actually need.
Mm.
So when you look at all the data and you look at what people are actually eating, I would just say this. Most people stress about how much protein they're getting. They measure it, they calculate it. And I will tell you, I do not calculate how much protein I'm getting. I just eat balanced meals with a variety of nutrients. And I can almost guarantee that if you do that, you're getting the amount of protein you need because there is protein in pretty much everything. And it's not like there's a difference between plant protein and animal protein. And this is something that I always get asked as well. Well, how can you get the right protein? Because I'm plant based and I'm actually very strictly plant based, 100% vegan. So they always ask me, how can you make sure that you're getting the right protein? Well, there's no right protein because if we just look at what protein is, it's basically the building blocks of some of the most essential things in your body. So, for example, your cells are made of protein, your enzymes, which catalyze all the reactions in the body, they're all made of protein. Some hormones are made of protein. So, really essential things in the body are made of protein. So we know that protein is essential. It's the building blocks of the most important things in our bodies.
Hmm.
However, when protein comes into the body, it's activated and inactivated in different ways and it's broken down. And it's broken down into what we call amino acids. So I would call them kind of like letters, right? We have the alphabet and then we have ABC. We have the letters. So it's similar with protein. We have these amino acids, and those amino acids, when they're broken down by the digestive system in the gut, once they're actually then released into the body, it's not like the body goes, oh, that protein came from a cow and that protein came from broccoli. The body doesn't do that. The body just goes, okay, this is the amino acid that I need, and I'm going to reassemble it into what it needs to be used for.
Hmm.
So that's why you don't have to get your protein from animals in order to get the protein that you need. You can absolutely get all the protein you need from plants. And in fact, I would say in many cases, for other reasons, it can sometimes be more beneficial.
I find this interesting because I was also raised a vegetarian. I've been a vegetarian my whole life. And that's obviously the first question I get asked is how do you get your protein? Where do you get your protein? But I don't think, at least I've never had the symptoms of being low in protein. Like I don't have any concerning health symptoms at the moment. So is protein deficiency even a thing or is it a common thing? And if it is, what are the signs of that?
So there is such thing as protein deficiency. Whether it's prevalent, I will argue that it's absolutely not a thing in terms of, is it something that you need to be concerned about? Does the average person need to be concerned about protein deficiency? I would say a resounding no. Like I said, most people are getting the protein they need
Mm.
and actually erring on the side of most people are getting more than they need. So basically, when we look at the recommended daily allowance, how that was calculated, I don't know if either of you are familiar with the penthouse studies from the 60s through 80s. So they're pretty well documented studies and very reputable within the nutrition industry. So they were studies that were performed at UC Berkeley and they were done in, I think, their nutrition lab, which was actually their penthouse, or that's why they're called the penthouse studies.
This
But
wasn't
what
like a
they did was
Playboy thing?
the reference is a really poor reference, but basically they took volunteers and it's actually a really disgusting study. And I think these days they wouldn't allow it, but back then a lot of things were allowed that are not ethically okay. So it was over a span of 17 years, which is why they're really reputable studies because they were done over such a long time. And they basically took these volunteers and they put them in these blue zoot suits. And these people defecated, urinated,
Hmm.
everything within these zoot suits. Yes. And so what they would do is they would like suction out everything out of the zoot suits. I can't remember the frequency of it, but they would suction them out on a frequent basis and they would measure the level of nitrogen in these zoot suits. And the reason they would do that, nitrogen is actually in what we call amines, and that's the amino acid part of protein, basically. So basically, what they would do is they would lower
Yeah.
and basically decrease and increase the levels of protein they were feeding to these subjects. And then they would measure how much protein or nitrogen was coming out. It was actually a nitrogen balance study. And then from that, they got all these numbers, not only that study, but multiple other studies. They got these numbers of what most people need in terms of protein. And then what they did was they worked out what is called the estimated average requirement, or EAR. Now, the EAR, as its name indicates, is an average.
Mm.
So what they did was they said, we need to work out some recommended daily allowances. But if we put the recommended daily allowance as the average, then half of the people are going to be deficient, roughly half, right?
Hmm.
So what they did instead was they went two standard deviations above the EAR, which mathematically speaking is basically about 97.5% of the population or the subjects were at this level. So then when they did that, they released the recommended daily allowances based on those numbers. And again, this is not just for protein, but across the board. So when you look at recommended daily allowances, you are not necessarily getting what your body needs. You are getting what almost everyone in the population needs. So
Hmm.
Mm.
if you are a smaller person, a larger, if you are exercising less, if you're, all of these factors are not actually factored into the RDA, which is why when people say to me, oh, but the RDA says this, I personally have found that listening to your body and reasoning from cause to effect is actually the most effective way to figure out what your body needs. We're all different. We have different lifestyles. We have different stresses on the body. We have different challenges to meet each day. We cannot expect that every person needs exactly the same thing.
Mm.
The protein RDAs and what most people are striving for are way above what they need. So people are counting and calculating, and I need to get this much protein, this much protein. And not only is that inaccurate, but it's also not realistic. It's not sustainable and it's not even healthy for the body and it's not even healthy for your psyche. For you to be constantly trying to figure out, is this enough protein and
Hmm.
stressing over that? It's so unnecessary.
Good.
So I always tell people, if you are consuming enough calories from good whole foods, you're basically guaranteed getting enough protein.
Mm.
I would not doubt that in any way. I would not question that. I would not say, oh, you might be. You're basically guaranteed as long as you're getting your calories from good whole foods. If you're eating only rice, you're probably in trouble, right? But if you're getting it from a variety of good whole foods,
Mm.
You don't need to.
Mm,
And you especially don't need to worry about where you're getting your protein from in terms of I have to get it from meat or that kind of thing.
mm.
Yep.
So,
That makes a lot of sense. I did have one question though. Protein is
yeah.
often characterized as a way to get more calories in so that you're not just eating straight carbs. So I'm thinking specifically around weight loss, right? So I often hear influencers talk about get lots of protein in so you don't eat so many carbs so that it's easier for you to lose weight. What about that situation?
Okay, so I'll give you the short answer. I would say the short answer is there is some truth to that. You can lose weight by consuming protein. Is it the best way to lose weight? I would say no. It's not the most effective way to lose weight. I personally don't think weight loss diets are really effective. The best way to lose weight and maintain a healthy weight is actually to adopt a complete lifestyle change that is sustainable. Weight loss diets are usually not sustainable because you cannot maintain that in the long term. So you might lose weight quickly, but then if you can't maintain it, you actually put the weight back on and it becomes very discouraging and kind of like a yo-yo thing. So,
Mm.
like I said, the short answer is yes, you can, but is that best? No. I would say probably the best way is to cut out processed foods in general. If you were just to cut out processed foods and just eat, and I talk about whole foods a lot, but really that is, I believe, the number one effective way to lose and maintain weight, just to cut out processed foods. Some people think processed foods is anything that comes in a package, but I mean, if you buy your rice in a package, that's okay. If you buy your beans in a package, that's okay, right? Some people say to me, well, you made that out of food in a package. And I'm like, yes, but it's still the whole food, right? I'm talking about very minimally processed. It hasn't gone through a factory and stripped off all the good nutrients. But protein in itself, yes, you can lose weight possibly quickly. Will you maintain that in the long term? And is it healthy and sustainable to do that? No, actually, if you excessively have too much protein in the long term, it can actually lead to kidney issues.
Mm.
So you don't want to be having too much protein basically all the time and for long, long amounts of time. High protein diets are terrible for the kidneys. It puts a
Mm.
lot of strain on your kidneys. If you also add to high protein diets, if you're adding medications for those who choose to drink alcohol, you're actually putting so much stress on your kidneys without it really benefiting you at all. So,
Mm. Do you think this hyperfixation on more and more and more protein also correlates with I don't know, I could be wrong in this, but at least this is my observation that people today are more focused on their appearance and more focused on having a six pack and good arms and things. Probably
Aesthetics.
because yeah, probably because of the influence of social media. Whereas I think before, well, we weren't constantly comparing ourselves and probably didn't have that standard that we have today. Do you think that's also part of the reason people are more focused on their aesthetic versus a healthy, good body?
100%. And I would say the biggest industry and even I guess sub industry is really the muscle building industry, the fitness industry, right? And specifically those who want to build muscle. But it's so interesting because all the new research is saying that protein is actually not the best way to build muscle, even though protein can help you build muscle. And that's really because muscle, it requires protein for sure.
Mm.
The best way these days to build muscle is actually to use your muscles. So
Ah, I thought you were gonna say steroids, but
that also will also help you build muscle. The most effective way they're finding in the fitness industry that targeted exercise regimes that actually target your muscle groups instead of focusing so much on getting protein, it's actually way more effective than protein. That's what all the new research is saying.
Mm.
And some of it actually hails back to old research, but then we went through this process where everyone was saying, oh, but protein can build muscle. And there was a lot of research that showed it can. But now it looks like we're going back to, okay, the more balanced and effective way is actually just to exercise in a targeted way and use the muscles that you want to grow, which seems really common sense, but we were distracted by protein for a long time.
yeah.
So, yeah.
Yeah. Okay, we've talked about protein a lot, but there's actually another element here that you claim in your article is perhaps more important or is the forgotten hero, and that is fiber. What's fiber? Why is it so good? Why should I care, Cece?
So, fiber is absolutely amazing. I personally think that fiber is probably the one thing that health influencers do not talk much about. Everything I'm seeing these days within the wellness influencer social media sphere is all about like wild caught fish and grass fed beef and all this kind of stuff. These things don't have fiber, and fiber is so crucial. But fiber is not really like, it's not glamorous, because when you talk about fiber and you talk about why fiber is so important, it's not like, "Oh, fiber is great because 'cause you're gonna get these big buff muscles and," you know, but without fiber, you literally, I'm just gonna say it, you cannot poop.
Mm.
And if you don't poop, you might have the best abs in the world, but if you can't poop, it doesn't matter what your abs look like. I promise you, you are going to be wishing that you could give your abs away and just have an opportunity to make a bowel movement. I think every person has been there at some point in their lives. Constipation is so uncomfortable. And to be honest, these days, the majority of people are constipated. I'm just going to put it out there. If you do not poop at least once every day, every single day, if you don't poop at least once, and it's better actually if you poop at least 2 to 3 times a day, if you're not doing that, you are constipated. Just straight up. And I know people are gonna be like, "No, no, I don't need to poop that much." But you should really be pooping roughly about half an hour after every meal. So if
Mm.
you eat 3 times a day, you should be pooping about 3 times a day. If you eat twice a day, you should be pooping at least twice a day. So fiber is really what is going to help you to poop. It is so essential for your gut microbiome. It is like the best feast your gut bacteria could ever have. And it is going to push waste material through your gut. And that is also going to help your gut as well, because that also means that you don't have waste material sitting in your gut for long periods. And it's just better in general. So, I could go on and on and on. I could literally spend the entire podcast talking about fiber. Fiber is so important. Those of you who are diabetics, and I'm not a doctor and I'm not claiming to give medical advice, but I know multiple people personally who have reversed their diabetes just by increasing fiber intake.
Hmm.
And increasing fiber intake really means eating more plants because you cannot get fiber from animal products in
I was
them.
going to ask, like, let's do some practicals. What's some of the best things that you could be eating to get lots of fiber?
One that to me I think is easy to incorporate is whole grains, because most people will need some kind of staple whole grain in their diet. And a lot of people will choose processed grains instead, processed carbs. But if you just changed from processed carbs to whole grains, that in itself would be a really quick way of getting more fiber. Increasing your fruit intake and your veggie intake. You could even keep your diet pretty much the same and just eat some fruit every morning.
Mm.
That would also increase your fiber intake. If you want to then swap out foods within your diet for fiber rich foods, that would be better, especially if you're eating less animal products. Because most of the time, if you're eating a lot of animal products, they are the ones that are making you full, which means you're eating less fiber.
Mm.
So if you swap out those animal products for more veggies, more legumes, things like that, that is another great way of increasing your fiber intake. Most people are getting about half what they need in terms of fiber. So most people are getting way more protein
Way
and not
less,
enough.
yeah, fiber. Yeah.
And that's why I love to talk about fiber, because protein is already getting all the spotlight and it doesn't need anyone to promote it. And like I said, protein is essential. I am not saying you don't need protein. Everybody needs protein, but I can almost guarantee the majority of people who are listening are probably getting enough protein already. I don't
Yeah.
think there's any risk. We already touched on the fact that protein deficiency is super rare. So
Mm. Yeah, and I think the stats are quite open. that we're not getting enough fiber as well.
Yes, exactly, exactly. The numbers are all saying that we're really a fiber deficient Western world as opposed to a protein deficient
Mm.
Western world.
So
So,
if
yeah.
somebody is fiber deficient, what are some telltale signs? Is it just that I can't poop? Is that it? Or is there other signs?
That's probably the most obvious and most uncomfortable one, but a lot of people don't realize how important fiber is actually even for your hormone levels. Many, many women, and it's more obvious for women to have obvious symptoms of hormone issues just because you will get that monthly reminder of your hormone problems. But fiber is super important in regulating estrogen levels in women. So, what it does is it actually binds to excess estrogen and it aids in that elimination process. So, it's not necessarily doing anything magical, except it's helping the natural process of the body along because our body naturally does eliminate excess estrogen. But for those women like myself personally, I grew up in basically an estrogen saturated society where we're covered in what we call phthalates, forever chemicals, xenoestrogens, basically artificial estrogens. They're in fragrance, they're in cleaning products, everything all around us. So we are saturated with excess estrogen. And in that sense, we do need help in eliminating, and fiber can help do that. So I would say for anyone struggling with hormone balance, that's another thing they should consider, not just getting rid of toxins and, xenoestrogens in terms of exposure, but also actually increasing their fiber consumption to regulate their estrogen levels.
Hmm,
So yeah.
that's interesting. I haven't heard of that before. You talk about fiber in this, but you also talk about some other things that kind of get missed when we focus on protein too much. And one of those other things is minerals. Can you talk us through that as well?
Yes. So some of the most important minerals, and I will say the number one most important mineral that a lot of people are deficient in, there's no official data on that. But when you look at food studies and the lack of consuming this mineral, it probably then leads to deficiency. I would say the number one is magnesium. And magnesium is so, so, so crucial. There are hundreds of reactions in the body that are catalyzed by enzymes and they need magnesium in order to actually work. So you like for example people with muscle issues, I always say have you tried taking magnesium? Nervous system issues, have you tried taking magnesium? Sleep problems, try some magnesium. Like magnesium is so so important and I don't want to go into detail about this because I could go on another tangent, but a lot of people these days with vitamin D deficiency, vitamin D synthesis in the body also requires magnesium. So a lot of the time, vitamin D deficiency can actually be magnesium deficiency.
Mm.
So there are so many things that need magnesium, and according to the food studies, probably about half of people don't get enough. So that's a lot. That's a lot of people who are not consuming enough magnesium.
Mm. You mentioned that you recommend people to take magnesium. Is magnesium also something that we can find in our foods, or is it something that is best sourced from supplements?
Absolutely. The best place to get magnesium, and I'll say this a lot for actually a lot of minerals, is dark leafy green vegetables. They're super high in magnesium, and dark leafy green vegetables are some of the most mineral rich foods in general. So if you just want a lot of minerals all in one hit, then that's what I would recommend, dark green leafy
Mm,
vegetables. Yeah.
wonderful. You also mentioned potassium, and I can bananas, right? Is it just a bunch of bananas? That's the only thing that I know about potassium.
Everyone always says that. So a lot of times, and something else that not everyone realizes, a lot of cases of diarrhea can be linked back to potassium deficiency.
Oh.
And that's probably the most common cause, not everything, obviously some things like, food poisoning, but the most common cause of diarrhea usually is potassium deficiency. And every time I say, oh, if someone says, oh, I have really bad diarrhea, I always recommend you increase your potassium. People always say, "Oh, I just need to go eat bananas." And then I'm like, "Well, yes, but how many bananas are you realistically going to eat, right?" Potatoes are great
Huh.
for potassium. Coconut water as well, if you can't stomach something that you can drink. Coconut water is awesome. Again, I'm gonna say it for pretty much every mineral, but dark green leafy vegetables, even beans, legumes, they're all really high in potassium. So those are things that you can get, you can have some variety. You don't have to always just eat bananas when you have potassium. So
Yeah, yeah. Awesome. Okay. And what about the last mineral that you mentioned in the article was zinc and selenium? This is another one where I'm like, I don't even like leafy greens again. Is what I'd call them.
yes, also seeds. Seeds are great. Selenium in particular, probably the best source would be Brazil nuts, but zinc you can get from basically a variety of seeds. So again, leafy greens as well for both of them as well. But for zinc, you can also have pumpkin seeds, sunflower seeds. Yeah, basically all the seeds are good for zinc. And zinc and selenium are really, really important for your immune system. So I don't know if you remember during COVID, there was a big push for things that would improve the immune system. And zinc actually kind of got a little spotlight during that time
Mm.
because people were actually interested in something that would help them with their immune system. And zinc is a great thing. You'll find zinc also comes in a lot of immune supplements, and that's one of the reasons why.
Hmm. I have a question. You mentioned that obviously fiber isn't really found in like meats, like fish or whatever. Are these other things, magnesium, potassium, zinc, and selenium, can they be found in meats?
Yes, yes. The minerals can be, fiber cannot. So if you are just wanting to increase your mineral consumption, yes, you potentially can get them from animal sources, but I personally love to operate on a more efficient basis. If I can get everything in one hit, then I want to get everything. And so that's really one of the main reasons why I'm plant-based because I can literally get everything in one hit. I can get all the minerals and fiber as well and protein from
Mm.
plants.
Okay, well, next up, I mean, if you thought that zinc and selenium were obscure, boy, are we about to get even more obscure. I have to confess, I know nothing about your next category, and that is phytonutrients. Are these nutrients that get in a boxing ring and punch each other, or am I completely off here?
They are actually just plant nutrients.
Okay.
And so, phytonutrients are really and you are perfect evidence of that, phytonutrients are really, really underrated. Nobody knows about them, nobody talks about them, but they're actually amazing, and they really give your cells the extra boost that you might need. Like, you might be eating really healthy in general, but you can't seem to get that extra boost you need. And that's where I would say phytonutrients can really, really help in that. Most of the time, you can tell something is rich in phytonutrients just by its color. You will get all the phytonutrients you need just by eating a rainbow of plants. So let me give you some examples. I can't remember the full name of it, but I think it's Do you remember the pigment in blueberries? So my husband's right here. It's a pigment in blueberries, and it makes it really blue. I think it's, like, called anthocyanin. Anyway, basically, the things that are making these different plants the beautiful bright colors that they are, those are usually the phytonutrients. So, blueberries are blue. Another example would be the orange in carrots. You have your bright greens, all of those things, those are your phytonutrients. And phytonutrients can be multiple different things. One of the ones that I think are really, really effective are flavonoids. And the reason flavonoids are amazing is because they actually prevent what we call oxidative stress. When your cells are undergoing oxidative stress, that's basically aging them. So if you want to prevent your cells from aging, you want to eliminate as much oxidative stress as possible, and flavonoids are, like, the best way to do that. So, yeah, flavonoids, amazing. And there are others as well.
What I'm hearing, CC, is that a healthy body means getting fiber, protein, minerals, phytonutrients, and it's like a balance of all these things. And you mentioned something before because I think sometimes when we think about all these different things, it can feel overwhelming because we start thinking, how much protein do I need of that? And how many grams of this do I need of that? And we start overthinking it all. But you mentioned something early in the conversation, which was this idea of listening to your body. And I think some people aren't really used to that idea because they're used to separating their portions on a plate or weighing their protein. So what does it look like to listen to your body? How do you practically do that?
You know what? I'm just gonna be really honest, and hopefully others can relate to this as well. I actually had to really work hard to learn how to listen to my body, and the reason is I was very much academic in my upbringing, and I was always trying to get my information from somewhere else. I needed to ask a teacher to get the answer to this. I needed to speak to my professor to get the answer to this. And something that my husband taught me actually, because my husband was like the opposite. He was like not into school, skipped school to go surfing, and then ended up becoming a cement finisher, which is much more hands on and less academic. And he really taught me that all you need to do is reason cause to effect. And you can do that yourself. And actually it's better for you to do it because even your doctor, you would have to tell your doctor every single detail of your life for them to be able to reason cause to effect in the best way. Not to say that doctors don't have information that can be useful to you. Absolutely. They can diagnose you. They have all this information that you don't know because you don't have that clinical experience, but you know your body. You know when you wake up in the morning, what your day is going to look like. You know every single second, every minute of what yesterday looked like, of what, you know the stresses that you personally are under. You know the things that you eat and then all of a sudden you feel this way. You feel better when you eat this, or you don't really feel that great when you eat this, or you ate this and you had an allergic reaction. Like all of those things. When you move a certain way, your body feels better. When you drink this much water, you feel better. So really, it's about paying attention. And these days, we don't do that because we have been conditioned to think that we need to go to somebody else to tell us what to do for our health. And I am not a doctor and I never give medical advice because I think that that can be very dangerous to do without medical training and expertise and understanding of these clinical conditions. However, I am a big, big, big promoter of learning and understanding your own body. And I think anybody can do that. And I just hope and pray that everybody feels empowered to do that. You don't have to have a lot of academic knowledge. You don't have to be like a real like nutrition geek. I personally enjoy reading research and studying and all of that. My husband is the opposite, but he is very, very good at reasoning cause to effect. And he actually, I would say, understands his body probably much better than I do myself, even though I have the extra nutrition knowledge. And so I think if that's one thing that I can leave everybody with is really to make sure that you learn and understand your own body because ultimately you are the advocate for your health. You're the advocate for your wellness and for your family's health and wellness as well. And so, yeah, I really want to empower everyone to really learn and listen to your body.
So good. I think that this is even more key in our day and age where I'll be honest, I think most of us, most of the time, ignore what's going on both in our body and also in our head. The mental health crisis that we're going through worldwide, I think, is evidence of that, as is a lot of the nutritional issues that we see day to day. I don't know if we can necessarily convince the gym bros to ditch their chicken and broccoli, but for those of us who are willing to take that extra step, Cece, I'd like to spend a little bit time at the end here talking practically, right? So, what can I do today in my meals, in the way that I eat, in the way that I choose what foods I consume, what foods I choose not to consume? What are some easy, practical things that I can do today? Because what I'm hearing from you is that it's not actually that hard. It's actually not that complicated, but I'd like to sort of put that into some practical perspective.
Yes. So my number one thing, and I'm probably sounding like a broken record at this point, but my number one thing that I always recommend people to do is just to eat the rainbow. If you are eating a lot of colors and plant foods based on color, you are getting so many different vitamins, minerals. That's really one of the best ways. And I'm not saying that you have to eat the rainbow all in one meal. Like, you don't need to eat like 5 different vegetables at one meal. If you have 1 or 2 different fruits in your breakfast, and then maybe 1 or 2 different veggies in your lunch, another 2 different ones in your dinner. You just want to do what is sustainable, what is realistic. You don't want to do something that is going to overwhelm you to the point that you can't sustain it. We are trying to aim for sustainable changes that are going to benefit your body. So always, always, always eat the rainbow wherever possible. And then I would say, like I mentioned earlier, start to swap out your protein things for fiber. And probably the easiest place to start is, I don't personally snack. I usually just have my set meals. For those who snack, the easiest thing is just to swap out your high protein snacks, because these days people are eating most of the time protein shakes or protein bars as snacks. And not only do you not need that protein, but they are super, super processed. So you don't want to be having high protein processed snacks when you could just have high fiber things. So I would say some of the easiest high fiber snacks to have are fruit. Fruit is awesome. If you still want to have a little bit of protein, again, I am not saying you need it. So, for example, if you are a gym bro and you want to make sure you are you can, eat fruit with some nut butter. Or you could even make like a chia pudding. Chia pudding is actually super good for fiber, for minerals, really healthy fats, and it still gives you protein as well. So that would be one area that I would say is a really quick swap, just swapping out your high protein things for more high fiber, and fruits are great for fiber.
Hmm. Awesome. Well, that's probably a good place to land. I've found this conversation really helpful and always enjoy having you on for a chat, Cece. So thank you again for joining us today. Everyone else listening, if you would like to read Cece's article, you can find it in the December issue of Science Magazine or on our website. It is titled Beyond the Protein Craze.
Thank you, Stacey.
Thank you guys so much.